That is true, and I don't know, but the quantities were quite awe-inspiring.
The enemy became our quartermasters. Yes, they were good at it because although the price is high, you have to sign with red pen, as we then nicknamed it. You have to sign with red pen because you have to lose life on both sides.
Nothing. You pick your man, you move. You dive down, you pick your man, you move.
So for us to actually survive and do well, we had to take from them by fighting hard to chase them out so that they leave their stores behind, because we had to capture some of these in order to use it, turn it against them. Take off their uniform, take off their boots, the gun, everything you can lay your hand on, everything they provided.
Biafra going by the name of God. Biafra going by the name of God. Biafra going by the name of Jesus. Biafra going by the name of God. Biafra going by the name of Jesus. Biafra going by the name of God.
The war was actually the war between David and Goliath. The sheer number of the Nigerian soldiers with every equipment you can think of was daunting.
Nobody realized the shattering effect on morale which the pounding of artillery and the pounding of mortar shells could effect, which was the pounding of artillery.
In 3 months of war, federal forces took 2/3 of Biafra's territory, and in the 4th month, armored columns marched through the Biafran capital, Enugu, reducing Biafra to a thin sliver of land.
I think actually that the fall of Enugu was for us a moment of truth. Any other thing prior to the fall of Enugu was a technical situation. But war was brought home to Biafra with the fall of Enugu. We had to evacuate our capital.
The Nigerian government had assumed that Biafra would fall with its capital. But the Biafran people, convinced that they would be massacred, retreated into their ever-shrinking country. For 2 years, Biafra became a vast refugee camp.
Biafra badly needed resupplying itself by way of arms and food, because the refugees had come into Biafra. There were more mouths to feed, and because of the war, the population was very mobile. And so it was necessary to get the message of the people in Biafra suffering, the mobility of the public, the air raids, the deaths, the genocides to the outside world.
The helping arm of a comrade.
Get back quickly!
It was extremely difficult. I think it would have been difficult for anybody to see these lads, and there were many of them lads, 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, in rags, barefoot, not to have been looked upon them with considerable affection. They suffered horribly. They took terrible wounds. Broadly speaking, and I've seen them, they showed extreme stoicism.
I will not die. I will not die of the vandal bullet.
I was 29 years old then, and I'd been in journalism for 10 years, and I'd covered some fairly good stories in Europe, in Paris, the assassination attempts on Charles de Gaulle, in East Germany, various fairly high-profile stories, but I had never actually, been in Africa, in what one call Black Africa, and I'd never been in a real war. After 6 months, the war still hadn't been concluded in Nigeria's favor, and I went back to Broadcasting House and suggested we should have a second look, and I was told quite bluntly then that it is not our policy to cover this war. This was a period when the Vietnam War was front-page headlines almost every day, regarded broadly as an American cock-up. And this particularly British cock-up in Nigeria was not going to be covered. I smelt news management. I don't like news management. So I made a private vow to myself, you may gentleman not be covering it, but I'm going to cover it. So I quit and flew out there and stayed there for really most of the next 2 years.
Biafra welcomed the foreign press because it knew that these were the people who were supposed to help disseminate Biafran propaganda. And so, even though Biafra had just one telex line to the outside world, and it was very much in demand by everybody, Frederick Forsyth was given access to this telex line. He was given a Volkswagen car, which was a rare thing in Biafra. He was given petrol vouchers by Ojukwu. This enhanced his work, and Frederick Forsyth became very, very useful as a friend of Biafra.
I followed the Biafran army very closely on a number of occasions. At one occasion, at Onitsha, I came across 300 members of the Apostolic Church of Onitsha slaughtered by the Federal 2nd Division.
Did you actually see these bodies?
Yes, I helped clear them out of the road. The Biafran army was so shocked they wouldn't march past them. It took us 18 hours to clear the bodies out of the way. And they all had their hands tied behind their backs and been shot at close range.
It was important for Biafra to let the world understand that something cruel was happening and that the Nigerian government did not want the rest of the world to know this. This was the difference in the two messages. This was the difference in the thrust. Biafra had nothing to lose. On the other hand, it had everything to gain in letting the outside world know what was going on.
Part of Biafra's propaganda machine was a private PR company called Mark Press, run by a marvelous American called William Bernhardt. And he'd already done a bit of political PR, but political PR in those days was quite new. And he got a call one day. He was in Geneva, based in Geneva. He got a call from the Biafran emissary in Paris, saying would he consider representing Biafra abroad and take on the account. And he told me later, he said, well, when I first heard Biafra, he said, I thought it was some goddamn toothpaste. But he said it was a country. So anyway, he took the account and he did a marvelous job. And one of his main preoccupations was to get journalists in to Biafra without as little hassle as possible, get them in, make sure the telex worked, make sure the film got out, and then make them happy.